how we can help more people wake up to this mathematically assured destruction of the money system that they live in.
These are the God-given inalienable rights, but unfortunately, writing these things down on a piece of paper just isn't enough. Ideally, we would import the laws of physics into the socioeconomic domain. Yeah. That's what Bitcoin is.
I saw a video of some guy from the ECB talking about their CBDC, and he is saying at a press conference, no, it's not going to be programmable, or no, we're not going to see identity. I just tweeted like open source everything or shut the fuck up.
This lean into self-help, like people are trying to figure it out. They should be studying economics rather than self-help because they're looking in the wrong direction. But if we frame it that way, then we might say that Bitcoin is the ultimate form of self-help.
One of the things that I see is that in our generation, people don't want to have kids because they are super insecure about the future. So they're purposefully saying, I am going against my biological urge. I think that is the craziest thing, actually, of the brokenness of money.
People advancing their own individual self-interest at the expense of other individual self-interest. It's cannibalism, basically. Like people are feeding off of one another rather than feeding one another. You actually level up, not only financially, but also spiritually.
When you adopt Bitcoin, you stop running the rat race and you start walking your own path. I want to start with one of your tweets, which said, Bitcoin is the highest expression of order yet achieved by humanity. And my kind of like thought with that is, you know, I agree. It's like Bitcoin is a human engineered constant that only is really comparable to time. How can we kind of start unpacking that?
Yeah, well, where do we start? I guess we would try to define order, first of all. Mm-hmm. Obviously, order is often contrasted with chaos. So order would be that domain of where there's no surprise, frankly. You know, it's a place that things are, well, orderly, clean, organized. Everything is in the place you expect it to be. If you want to use the Jordan Peterson sort of language, you could say it's explored territory, whereas chaos is unexplored territory. And, you know, the individual and the logos is what mediates between the two. And so order is also has this mathematical connotation, you know, like, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those numbers are in order, right? Mm-hmm. 7, 8, 5, 2, 1, 3. It's like, well, that's not really in order. Those numbers are out of order in a sequential sense. It might be in order from some other equation. There's also the derivative sense of this is like, oh yeah, everything is in order here, right? Like the books are in order. The balance sheet balances, all of these things. So there is this sense of the word order in that we have demystified and decomplexified reality into a very graspable, manipulable format, right? Something that we can understand. Again, metaphorically speaking, is like to stand beneath, to have a deeper perspective on a thing. Mm. Well, before you can stand beneath the thing to have the deeper perspective or the more comprehensive cognitive grasp of it, you actually need to circumscribe it, right? You need to know the boundaries, and then you need to know all of the component parts. You need to understand it inside and out, so to speak, to truly understand it. So how does this pertain to Bitcoin? I would first go to, there's a concept in economics called perfect information. And so these are conditions in which all market actors have perfectly symmetrical information, and that anytime something new is discovered, that it's immediately disseminated to all market actors. This is obviously an ideal state. Doesn't exist in the real world because, you know, knowledge is most salient to the man on the spot. You know, when I don't know, when you shoot the ground, when Jethro shoots the ground in Beverly Hillbillies and the oil spouts up from the ground, it's like, well, the man on the spot has made that discovery. Mm. Everyone else in the world isn't aware yet that the supply of oil is about to go up, and therefore there's going to be downward pressure on the price and all these things, right? Like he has to make other market actors aware by harvesting that oil and selling it into the marketplace to disseminate that information, basically. So perfect information doesn't exist in the real world. Knowledge is inherently distributed. People that have a high degree of access to a particular time and place tend to have more context, more knowledge. Experience itself, as in when you develop a skill, these things they're embodied, right? You can't just read a book on how to ride a bicycle, for instance, right? You need to actually go out and move your body and really code this action pattern into your body to be able to ride a bike. So information is naturally distributed and not evenly distributed. So it's not, the real world is composed of imperfect information, but there's this ideal in economics called perfect information, where everyone basically has access to equal information at all times. And this underpins another ideal in economics called perfect competition, where basically all profits are competed away, because profits only occur where there's an asymmetry of knowledge, basically, or access.
Yeah.
Access is obviously related to knowledge. If you know where the thing is, well, then you can go and get it. So Bitcoin, and this was just like, I learned about this in college, and it was just that. It's kind of a thought experiment that's useful for contrasting the real world against. And it's also an ideal toward which you would want markets to move. You actually would prefer that information be more perfect rather than less, because that would benefit consumers the most, right? Consumer competition is what drives the products, the quality of products higher and the prices of those same products lower. So the closer you get to perfect information, the closer you get to perfect competition, the closer you get to maximizing customer satisfaction, basically, at the cheapest possible prices. So it's like, these are the terms or concepts that underpin an ideal economic system. But prior to Bitcoin, they were just that. They're just ideals, right? They didn't have any implementation. But Bitcoin is, it's not, I guess you could argue that it's not perfect information, but it's pretty damn close, right? Like, we know with absolute certainty, I don't want to say absolute certainty, with approximate certainty, exactly how much Bitcoin has been mined up until this point. We know that with almost absolute certainty, right? You can basically see what block height is and multiply it by all the epochs, and you know how many Bitcoin are in circulation. You can obviously audit it yourself. So that's very much perfect information. But looking forward, it's even more interesting, because we know how many Bitcoin will be issued over time, all the way until the last Bitcoin is issued in the year 2140. So we do finally have this implementation of the ideal of perfect information, at least in the market for money itself. And that's what makes Bitcoin mining, which is the competitive aspect of Bitcoin, the market aspect of Bitcoin, such a ruthless, capitalistic industry, right? Because information is so clean and perfect, and the name of the game is basically gain access to cheaper energy to discover Bitcoin, to generate more hashes, to earn more Bitcoin faster than your competitors. So it's a very clear game, very clear rules, very clear objective, right? Like, just get the cheapest energy possible or get the best possible mining equipment, right? Which is, how much efficiency can you turn watts into hashes? Right. So it's a very clear game, very clear objectives, and you get this seriously competitive market that benefits consumers a lot, right? If you're a user of Bitcoin, well, what's been the net result of this game played out over the past 15 years? Like, well, your savings is compounded at, whatever it is, an average of 200% annual growth rate year over year. And you hold this monetary instrument that is the most secure. It's basically a share in the most secure computing network in the history of the human race. And you are also afforded this virtual certainty that whatever fraction of the total Bitcoin money supply you have, right? If you have 1,000 Bitcoin out of a possible 21 million, well, that your fraction will never be diluted, right? You have this kind of perfect information, if you will, form or guarantee, if you want to call it that, that the amount of the money supply you hold on a pro rata basis will never be diluted. Now, it might be increased. You know, if someone burns a certain amount of Bitcoin, well, then you get kind of a pro rata increase in your purchasing power. But so there's all that. And the only other thing I would add here is, like, you use the term engineered truth, engineered money. It is fascinating to me that the depth of the order Bitcoin is able to generate, right, in terms of kind of its network security, the pristine, unamendable nature of its records, which is what also makes it really valuable, right? Like it's a history that cannot be rewritten. Mm-hmm. These things are based on Bitcoin mining. So there's like it's creating this perfect order, if you will, right? If we just say perfect order is something like a record of history that cannot be rewritten.
Yes.
Right. That's very orderly, can't be changed. What's another example of that? I'm not exactly sure.
I feel like they kind of tie in with each other, right?
Well, that's what I was going to say is that the we get more perfection of order, if you will, as Bitcoin mining becomes more competitive. So the difficulty adjustment goes up as more hash rate is brought online.
Yes.
And what is that doing? That is the difficulty adjustment increases the chaos that Bitcoin miners have to explore, right? They're creating hashes trying to guess the right answer to this puzzle, but the puzzle becomes larger and more difficult to solve the more hash power comes online. So it's as mining is pushed further into the chaos of the uncertainty space of trying to solve, find the right hash to solve the current iteration of the puzzle, that increases the orderliness on the other side by making it, more secure.
Yes.
Another block in the chain, a more unrewritable history. iCoin Technology has released a slick new hardware wallet. It looks like a mini iPhone with a high-res 3-inch touchscreen and camera on it. The device has no Wi-Fi, no cellular connection, and no GPS. It is an air-gapped hardware wallet which uses QR codes and a camera to communicate with the Bitcoin network. It has a built-in camera which is required for air-gap operation, and it has an optional Bluetooth compatibility. It's really a brand new user interface and user experience for a Bitcoin hardware wallet. iCoin makes self-custody accessible, easy to use, and non-intimidating. It even comes with an optional custom iCoin thermal printer, so you can print out the private key and its associated QR code when you're setting up the wallet. This makes setup quick and simple. Also, it is easy to restore the wallet just by reading the seed phrase QR code with the wallet camera. And as we always talk about on this show, the only way you can truly own your Bitcoin is by having it in self-custody. So you need a device like the iCoin wallet to truly own your Bitcoin. So go to iCointechnology.com/breedlove today for 30% off the purchase of this sleek new hardware wallet. Again, that's iCointechnology.com/breedlove. In times of chaos, clarity can be currency. Right now, supply chains are fragile and cash flow has never been more volatile. If your business can't adapt in real time, then you're exposed. That's where NetSuite by Oracle comes in. It's the #1 cloud ERP, trusted by over 41,000 businesses for a reason. It gives you total visibility, from global shipments to real-time cash flow to the true cost of what's stuck. NetSuite consolidates accounting, finance, inventory, and human resources into one unified platform, one source of truth. With AI baked in, routine tasks get automated away so that your team can stay focused on high leverage activities. If I were scaling a business right now, NetSuite is the system I would use. One system, full control. With NetSuite, you can tame chaos. If you're running a business doing 7 figures or more in revenue, grab their free ebook, Navigating Global Trade, 3 Insights for Leaders at netsuite.com/whatismoney. Again, that's netsuite.com/whatismoney.
When you look at the difference between Bitcoin and crypto, is that Bitcoin starts as a valuable ledger, the system or the network, or a network of true information, 100% true, constantly verified to be true every 10 minutes. And that subsequently makes the token valuable. Whereas with crypto, it's like the other way around. It's an attempt by different teams, then it's already centralized, of course. But to empower a system, eventual system somewhere to exist with the use of a token. That's why they pitch the token and not the system. Yeah, what do you think about that?
That's a great one. So, yeah, I mean, obviously the big difference in the operative word between Bitcoin and crypto is decentralization. And that there's a lot to unpack there, right? It's sort of an obscure word. I think if you are a reader of Austrian economics or computer science, you probably have some familiarity with centralized versus decentralized networks. And the question might naturally arise, why does a decentralized network lend itself to be more conformant to truth, whereas the centralized networks tend not to be? I think if you even consider, capitalism, for instance, right, in the actual traditional form, where we're actually talking about free market capitalism, we're not talking about the crony fiat capitalism we see in the world today. That's not the case, because people are having their property rights violated left and right. It's not, to the extent people are having their private property rights violated, is the extent to which it's not a decentralized system. Decentralized would be that each individual market actor is able to make their own decisions, and they bear the consequences of those decisions in a very symmetrical way. All right. So they have rules. You can think about this in the sense of a game. When you have a game that has rules that are applied evenly to everyone and they don't change, well, that's a fair game, right? You can play, you can build a strategy. Any fair game you've ever played is this way, right? The rules don't change over time. As the old saying goes, you can't change the rules in the middle of a card game. Because once you introduce the authority to change the rules, then it's no longer a game. It degenerates into a political struggle. Like, people will basically fight over the power to make the rules, because the power to make the rules is the power to win the game forever, basically.
Yeah.
So only in truly decentralized systems do you get this universally even application of rules. And this also gets into the word corruption, right? Corruption has an etymological origin related to the word rupture. And a rupture is when a membrane splits in two, right? That something splits the surface membrane and something comes out of it, right? People get a ruptured organ or a ruptured, muscle tissue, that something, literally the surface splits open and something spills out of it. Well, that's a separation, right? There's a separation. Something that was supposed to be held under one kind of surface membrane is now released. And so you get these two different surfaces interacting. And that is, in my opinion, the reason there's an etymological relation to the word rupture and the word corruption is because corruption is that. It's a two-tiered rule system, right? Rules for thee, not for me. This has also been called apartheid in Africa. And so when you have rules that are not applied evenly, you don't have a game anymore, right? It's very important. No, it's indispensable to a game that you have agreement on the rules and that the rules don't change. And if the rules do change, they need to change at the same time and be applied evenly to all. And they need to change not in the middle of a game. So, nature has this, there's kind of this decentralized game built into nature. It's like the game of evolution, right?
Yes. Yes, exactly what I was to say. Nature. It's like nature.
If the adaptation works, right? If it helps you succeed in reproducing, well, then that feature, whatever it may be, right? A giraffe with a longer neck, a turtle with a harder shell, whatever the thing is, that adaptation will then propagate, right? If it works, keep it. If it doesn't, discard it. This is like the algorithm of evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same algorithm that applies in capitalism, right? Where if a product works, as in it satisfies a consumer want better, faster, cheaper than the other options available, well, then people will buy it. People will prefer it. And this will create an incentive for producers to produce it. So you'll see that tool or technology spread. And so all of that progress, right, even in a very evolutionary biology sense or in a technology sense, they're both enabled by decentralized competition. If you introduce centralization to that, I guess in natural selection, that would be something like artificial selection, where, nature, the selection pressures introduced by nature are replaced by the selection pressures introduced by some tyrant, right? If, what's that meme where it shows the wolves like 100,000 years ago, and it says, hey, let's go get some food next to that campfire. What's the worst that could happen? And then it says 100,000 years later, and it shows these little designer dogs and party hats.
Licking your feet.
Yeah. And so that is the transition from natural selection to artificial selection, right? You've gone from decentralized, decentralized fitness feature discovery to centralized fitness feature discovery, right? So you go from this like wolf that's bred to hunt and kill and survive and have certain social bonds inside of the pack, and you go to this, you turn him into like a consumer toy for humans, right? When wolves are bred to become designer dogs. So that's just kind of one angle, I guess, on how decentralization is the way of nature and how centralization tends to corrupt it and make things that are very much less robust and much less fit for survival, right? If you imagine pitting a timber wolf versus a chihuahua, you get some sense of how much better decentralization is than centralization at creating things that are robust and anti-fragile.
And when I think about our fiat money world, even this week I saw a video of some guy from the ECB talking about their CBDC, and he is saying at a press conference with his title, no, it's not going to be programmable, or no, we're not going to see identity, or no, like this. And I just tweeted like, open source everything or shut the fuck up. It's just, we have come to accept the talk, not the walk, right? It's the same as the Bank of England saying like, the gold delivery is a bit slow because, sometimes we move the bullion and there's like numbers and the computer. I don't know. I don't know if you saw that press conference, but I was watching that and I was like, wow, if people still accept that, which I think shows where we kind of are in terms of, our resistance against the flaws of fiat money by the majority, which I definitely think we are not there yet, when you still see, stuff like that still working. So, and of course, then in Bitcoin, it is all walk, no talk, right? It's the whole proof of work thing permeates true Bitcoin, and it's rules, not rulers, and you can only benefit from the value that Bitcoin can bring when you adopt or when you comply with the rules, and you comply with the rules because all the other players comply with the rules, right? Like that.
Yes.
That I find a very interesting thought. Like you're forced to follow the rules from the start, basically.
In the sense of ultimate capital T truth, ultimate reality, right? That's beyond all concept, all understanding. We can just sort of see or comprehend different aspects of it. That capital T truth is never dependent on anything whatsoever. In fact, everything is dependent on it.
Yes.
Right?
The truth just is.
The truth just is, right? So the selection pressures, to go back to the Darwinian language, just are, right? They exist,
Yes.
right? You
Yes,
either can
exactly.
get the food or you can't, right?
Yeah.
Which you either will survive or you won't.
Yeah.
So those selection pressures, to use like Descartes language, like they're objectively true, right? We're subjectively trying to
You can ignore
pursue
it.
them.
Subjective. Yeah.
Right. Ayn Rand. You're free to ignore the consequences of reality, but you are not free to ignore. I'm sorry. You are free to ignore reality, but you are not free to ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. Is what she said.
It's like you're born as a little giraffe, and you're like, I'm not going to stand up. In the middle of the of the plane. Yeah.
And then by natural selection, there won't be little baby giraffes that don't stand up.
Exactly.
Right? Because those that did not survive, and therefore they didn't propagate, and therefore they don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So truth is real. Like it's almost, again, truth, reality. Like we use these terms almost interchangeably. There is some philosophical difference, but capital T truth, ultimate reality, everything is dependent on it. And like to give you a sense of how serious this is, when I say everything, again, we mentioned survivability obviously is dependent on it. How best do you conform yourself to what is true? That will determine your ability to survive. And I love, on this particular point, I love Francis Bacon's quote that nature to be commanded must be obeyed.
I like that.
Actually, for the Wright brothers to fly, it wasn't a matter of them bending any rules or creating some independent structure. What they actually had to do was discover natural laws and then conform the technology to exploit, to take advantage of those laws, basically.
I wanted
right?
to say comply. They comply.
Right. They must comply. They must obey, to use Bacon's word, with these laws so that they can accomplish their aim of flight, right? Mm-hmm. Which may seem like something that's not, people might say, oh, well, that's not natural. You used a technology to exploit the mechanism of lift to create a machine that flies, and therefore you took the two-legged ape into the sky. But there is, and you could say, okay, maybe that's the line between natural and artificial is a very interesting one philosophically we can go into later, but suffice it to say, they had to obey nature to command it in the sense of, leaving the earth and taking to the skies, right? They had to discover that mechanism and use it according to natural laws. They didn't create a new law. They followed the rules to gain this ability of flight. So commitment to truth obviously matters for innovation. It obviously matters for evolution, as we talked about with the giraffe. Even your ability, this will probably blow some people's minds, your ability to tell a lie successfully also depends on the truth. And what I mean by that is if I tell you a lie and I say, I don't know, the sky is red, I am actually depending on your commitment to the truth for you to believe that lie, right? If you don't have a commitment to figuring out what is true, then how could I ever assume that you're going to believe my lie, right? There has to be this assumption on my part that you are actually trying to find the truth for me to be able to kind of intervene and insert something that's not true to get you to take it up as if it were true.
Well, something can only be a lie if a truth exists, right?
Exactly. And then by way of contrast, it's like if the truth doesn't exist, then what is a lie, right? It's a misrepresentation. What's the real representation?
Yes.
If you're anything like me, you understand that Bitcoin is something we can use every day to connect, to collaborate, and to build stronger, freer communities. As true Bitcoiners, you all know we are each responsible for onboarding more Bitcoiners. That's why I chose to partner with Cowbolt, an expense splitting app that settles in Bitcoin. It can be as simple as splitting a dinner bill. Your friend covers dinner and you reimburse them, but you send it back to him in Bitcoin. Now your friend has their first sats. And as I always say, where your money goes, the mind follows. By using Cowbolt to get Bitcoin into the hands of your friends and family, you can help us orange pill the world. Cowbolt is built to let you split costs, share expenses, and settle instantly, while always keeping full control of your keys. Cowbolt is simple, social, non-custodial, exactly how Bitcoin was meant to be used. If you're serious about Bitcoin, it's time to act like it. Download Cowbolt today on iOS or Android. To learn more, go to cowbolt.com. Again, that's Cowbolt, COWBOLT.com. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. So you get into these definitions of truth, like an accurate representation of reality or an accurate depiction of reality. Heidegger talked about this concept of aletheia, which is like disclosure or unconcealedness, that basically the more we could reveal of nature, that the more truth we would be interacting with. And so one of the deepest, so you got this relationship between truth and independence. You could say truth is the most independent thing. It's also something that we discover, right, over time. Well, so what's a fundamental example of this? The laws of physics, right? The laws of physics are very fundamental. They govern everything. They're the rules that govern all action in space and in time. They're very independent. So far as we know, they can't be changed. They're immutable. Yet everything else depends on them, right? You literally can't do anything, observe anything without complying or being confined in the laws of physics. And so that's the reason they're so deep and they're so true, right? There's truth both in their independence and truth in their immutability, I guess, right? That it's something fundamental that doesn't change, and it's on which all other change and variation is based, basically, so far as we know. Again, so what is this? It's like a cosmic protocol in a way, right? Like this is the way things work. The speed of light is this. The terminal velocity on Earth is that. The Euler's number is this. There's like these sort of independent variables that are encoded into the structure of reality. And what's important about those is they're human out of the loop, right? I've run this thought experiment before. You could imagine that somehow there was a device. Say there's only one of these devices in the world that allows its user to manipulate the laws of physics, right? If you could somehow gain access to this device, it would let you, I don't know, turn gravity up or turn gravity down, or, change the speed of light or these other things. You could imagine how much political strife and warfare would be engaged in over that thing, because whoever got a hold of the thing would eventually run the universe, at least the human world. Well, probably beyond the human world, they would win forever. You could never beat them, right? If they can turn off gravity, or they can turn off your metabolism or whatever, then the game of existence would end, right? Because the rules again would have been corrupted. They would be changeable, and then the whole thing would come undone. So what's our aim as like humans, in that we're trying to play these games with one another in a way that's productive. But to do that, we need to try and emulate the incorruptible rules of the laws of physics, right? There's a reason the laws of physics work so well, because they're not changeable, because they're not manipulable. So what we need are similar rules in the socioeconomic domain, right? And we've tried to do this a lot of different ways. In the US Constitution, which founded the United States as a constitutional republic, we have this list. It's called the Bill of Rights, right? These are the things, these are the enumerated things that government can never do no matter what, right? These are the God-given inalienable rights that no government can take away. It's not that we wrote them down and said, here's what the government gave you. We wrote them down and said, these exist. These precede, these are antecedent to all governments. Therefore, the institution of government cannot manipulate any of these things, right? The top of the list is the freedom of speech, then the right to bear arms, and so on. So that was an attempt to take human out of the loop on the rule set, right? We wanted these immutable rules. And again, this was like a derivative of the Magna Carta 800 years, 500 years prior to the US Constitution. The year 1215, King John signed the Magna Carta, life, liberty, inviolable property. Right. So he's trying to, again, that was another attempt at creating this inviolable, incorruptible rule set that would maximize the productivity and flourishing of the society that adopted it. So we've had strides towards this, but unfortunately, writing these things down on a piece of paper just isn't enough. It isn't enough to get people to guarantee their commitment to it into the future. By just putting scribbles on a piece of paper. So what do you need? You need something stronger. You need something that is incentive-based, something that incentivizes people to comply with it. Which again, if we look at physics and evolution, like the failure of not complying is death.
Yes.
Right? And the end of your bloodline and like all these other really heavy consequences. Ideally, we would be able to import or piggyback on, again, Francis Bacon style, right? To use the laws of physics to our advantage, to command the laws of physics, quote unquote, we have to obey the laws of physics. So how do we command these rules in a socioeconomic way that allow us, that give us incorruptible, immutable rules in, say, the social and economic spheres? Well, I think that was basically considered to be an impossible task prior to Bitcoin. It's like, how could you ever, this is one of the core differences too between natural sciences and social sciences. The reason you can build frameworks in natural sciences is because there are relations that are fixed and independent, right? So every time we take water to 0 degrees centigrade, it freezes. Mm-hmm. Every time we take it to 100 degrees centigrade, it boils. All right, those are fixed relations on which we can build natural sciences. There are no such fixed relations in the social domain, right? There's no word I can say to you that I will be certain you'll respond in a certain way, right? That it's all human interaction is inherently unknowable. And so therefore you have to have social sciences, which are a whole different animal. And so the ideal situation, because we have to play these games with one another, whatever they are, right? And you could be super general here. You could say, okay, all human action consists of an aim, right? You're in place A, you want to go to place B, right? So there's always an aim or an objective. And it's always confined by the laws of physics or the rules of physics. So that's a game, right? You've got an objective and you've got rules. So the question is, there's a lot of games we can play with each other. We can play cooperative games that increase wealth per capita. We could play competitive games, violent games. We can go to war with each other, right? We can lie to each other. We can tell the truth to each other. There's all these different things we can do. So the question becomes, how do we get the right rules for us that will bind all of us in a way that leads us to be more productive and to be able to persistently compete over time without ever degenerating the game into a political struggle or a violent struggle, which just, again, destroys the game. And so ideally what we would do is we would import the laws of physics, at least the integrity and the immutability of the laws of physics, into the socioeconomic domain. Okay, well, what is Bitcoin?
Yeah.
That's what Bitcoin is, right? Bitcoin uses energy expenditure via mining to guarantee. It's also using the self-interestedness of each individual actor. So there's there's a social component that is not, it's not as hard and fast of a guarantee as water freezes at 0 degrees centigrade, but it's a pretty damn good, it's the highest level of assurance you can get in the social domain that animals will act in their own individual self-interest, right? It's kind of like the law of Darwinian self-preservation.
I feel it's like another fractal of the same thing that we talked about before. Like they're all little consequences of each other, but they work in the same way. It's like the incentives are constantly further and further aligned and cemented, and therefore it's inviting to actually follow a set of decentralized rules. Like that's pretty new.
Yes.
Wouldn't you say? Right.
Yeah. I mean,
it's scary, maybe, like it's because it's so new.
Yeah, it's new, it's very new in its implementation, but I would say the principles, again, we've definitely been flirting with the principles for a longer period of time, right? Just the idea of private property, for instance, is okay, everyone that does the work to produce the thing has the exclusive rights to enjoy the thing and the responsibility to take care of the thing. And so, and those rights can be traded, right? Like we can trade with one another via contract.
Yeah.
And so basically the principle underneath private property is if you earned it, you keep it. If you didn't earn it, you don't keep it, right? It's like the principle of justice encoded into this socioeconomic tool. Okay, great. That's what we want. But the problem is you just have to encourage people to pretend like that is true because it's not actually true, right? If you make a sandwich, there's not some holy law that makes you have the exclusive rights to be able to digest that sandwich, right? If I come along and I take it and I eat it, well, then I just benefited from your work at your expense. So we needed to induce people to try and follow these rules with disincentives, basically. Like if you steal from someone, you're going to get, you're going to get in trouble, basically.
Yes.
Okay, well, Bitcoin, again, sort of flips that. And it's like, no, we're going to actually incentivize you to be honest and to act in a way that is that affords mutual productivity. Again, it does this weird thing where by it's just an abstraction, it's just an idea, it's just language, information, digital protocol, whatever you want to call it. So it's just this abstraction, basically, but it becomes reified and concretized by anchoring it to energy expenditure. All of a sudden, this idea of fixed supply money or inviolable private property, private property that's very hard to separate from its owner, that's just an idea that we were trying to get people to follow with the Constitution and rule of law and all these things. But now it's incentivized through the expenditure of energy. By expending real world energy to create Bitcoin, it anchors the abstract world into the physical world. And so we get this strange move where Satoshi imported the integrity and the immutability of the laws of physics into the socioeconomic domain through the advent of global digital non-state cash. And that's a mouthful, but it's like, holy shit, how profound is that? Like you literally just bridged the unbridgeable worlds. And you also blew Descartes apart, right? There is no, I think, therefore I am. There is no bright line between thinking subject and objective world. Right? Satoshi proved that basically, that you've anchored, money is such an interesting thing. It's subjectively chosen, right? Anyone can choose whatever their money is going to be. And then whatever that consensus point is, becomes money. But that doesn't mean we can just arbitrarily consent on anything as money. There are selection pressures. There are objective properties that make a certain asset better or worse at fulfilling the role of money. So Bitcoin kind of interestingly bridges this chasm between subject and object. And again, other things do this, right? Like we've talked about evolution a lot. Well, was evolution subjective or objective? Well, we mentioned the objectivity of selection pressures, right? Like if you're either going to get the food or you're not, if the leaves are too high on the tree, well, as a giraffe, your neck is either long enough or it's not to eat that. The longer neck giraffe is probably going to outcompete the shorter neck giraffe, right? Okay, so that's objective selection pressures. But what about mate selection? right? Animals choose who to mate and reproduce with. So there's a subjective element. So what is it? Evolution is neither objective nor subjective. So what is it? It's like this weird in between. And I think money and Bitcoin are similar.
Oh, so many things to pull on. I'm thinking about Knut Svanholm, who says, "You are the Bitcoin."
We are part of the network for sure. Would you rather have 1 Bitcoin today or 2 Bitcoin a few years from now? Bitcoin mining is a tried and true strategy for accumulating Bitcoin. Over a 2 to 4 year time frame, successful miners have consistently accumulated more Bitcoin than they otherwise would with a traditional dollar cost average strategy. Blockware mining as a service enables you to start mining Bitcoin from your laptop. Blockware handles everything from securing the miners to sourcing low-cost power to configuring the mining pool. They do it all. Plus, with Blockware's one-of-a-kind mining marketplace, you can buy and sell live Bitcoin miners with just a few keystrokes. In this marketplace, buyers get to purchase live machines at vetted facilities, enabling them to mine with zero lead time. And sellers get the opportunity to liquidate their machines and hosting contracts at will. This means you can mine Bitcoin with zero long-term commitment and high liquidity on your mining rigs. Blockware will even cover your energy bill for 1 week per mining rig when you sign up at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. Again, that's 1 free week of Bitcoin mining at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. And on top of this offer, you can also use code BREEDLOVE to get $100 off your first mining rig with Blockware Solutions. Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLFNYC.com.
I like what you said about, human society or the evolvement. Like, it is chaotic, objectively chaotic. And I also like learning about the idea that the concept of decentralized rules or agreeing on a certain truth as a starting point for the development of, in this example, a society, a country, that existed before. And so the need for humans to have that, I think, is very clear, because the fact that human society is chaos and there are different wants and needs and different strengths and skills and whatever, like the whole, the people are so diverse and different that is chaos in essence. But we need a system based on a truth, and yes, you can set it, you can put it on paper, but as you are experiencing perhaps also on your side of the world after 250-ish years, yeah, there are different interpretations to this original set of rules, especially the property part, right? Like we've seen that non-existent in the money sense, definitely. So if you need decentralized rules, but the rules for the technology you use to communicate with each other, to exchange value with each other, are by definition centralized. They can therefore be corrupted. You see that they are corrupted. And wouldn't that show that is a flawed system just from that is a flawed system from the start, that is eventually destined to fail?
Yeah, I think history bears that out pretty well. Right? Where have we ever seen a centralized rule system persist forever?
I was thinking, Bitcoin is kind of like this portal of going from a a high entropy financial system, a lot of disorder, a lot of low energy, misdirected energy, perverse incentives, to a low entropy financial system. Because if the base layer of Bitcoin is the engineered truth, it's the pure truth of the system, then that could be a base layer in order to actually, build upon. And the more economic energy is eventually stored in Bitcoin, the higher its probability of surviving if more people put their energy towards that, which is lower entropy, eventually leads to more order. And this is what I got from the My Big Toe podcast. When I was listening to it, he said, lower entropy means higher stability, higher predictability, higher potential for growth. And then I was like, wow, that sounds like Bitcoin as a base layer for a monetary system.
Yeah, well, let's see here. I think all social orders, right? So we're going to have, again, predictable relations and behaviors among people. These require people to accord themselves with a certain framework. Morality is a great example, right? Just the fact that we can generally expect not to be killed or robbed when we go outside of our house in most normal modern societies, right? That is an element of social order, that we have internalized these rules, right? These moral principles that we in general don't hurt one another or don't steal from one another. That's what allows us to interact with strangers at scale, right? Which is, by the way, a very weird thing. Animals don't do that too much. Animals stick to their little pod or their little herd or their little tribe, whatever you want to call it. They don't build global societies where we just sort of, glide by strangers. We even, purposely try to interact with strangers, right? We'll go out of our way to talk to someone, or we try to make new friends, or to meet someone at a party, or social mixers, all these things. This is where we have created systems that allow us to interact with strangers in a way that nature didn't really afford us, right? So, so I call these like points of common unity, right? We say like, don't kill, don't steal. It could be moral, could be also a little more external, like the rule of law. We follow the law of the land. You know that there's consequences if you do a certain thing. You drive in your lane, right? You'll use a blinker to go into this lane. Like these are all things that everyone's doing. And as a generalized expectation, it allows us all to flow together more seamlessly. These points of common unity are essential to community, right? You can't have community. That's where you get the word community. It's built on points of common unity. And so these are the rules that, let's say, reward productive acts and penalize destructive or non-productive acts, right? That's why we don't kill. That's why we don't steal. That's why we use our blinker. Even little things, right? Like holding the door open for someone, right? It's just kind of a general like what would you call that? Like a chivalry or a manner, an act, a mannerism, something like that. It just helps people. It's the nice thing to do because you've already got the door open. You already went through it. Why would you let it shut in someone's face if you could just, expend a little bit extra energy to hold it open so they could pass through easily, right? So that's like another just kind of generalized practice. So why do we do all that? And how does it relate to entropy? Well, nature and let's see the horizon of the future, right? The future is always coming at us.
Yes.
Nonstop. So not the one thing, but one thing we cannot do anything about. With that onrushing horizon of the future comes uncertainty, right? We never know what's going to happen next, right? We have very minimal capacity to predict into the future and almost no capacity to predict into the future once you get into complex systems, which is almost everything, right? So we are constantly facing an avalanche or a deluge of uncertainty, which you could equally call entropy, right? The entropy is just coming at us all the time. So what do we do to try and survive in that? Is like, well, we create order, right? We create culture, we create capital stocks, we accumulate goods and tools and machines and factories and all of these things that can allow us to produce more consumer goods per unit of human effort than we otherwise could. And we do all these things collaboratively. So this activity of engaging in markets together, of economic calculation, of trying to create profitable businesses that satisfy consumer wants better, faster, cheaper, the act of capital accumulation, all of these activities are entropy mitigation. We're just trying to mitigate entropy so that we can actually have more leisure. We can raise more children, right? Mm-hmm. We can have a greater degree of certainty in the resources available to us to support other people coming online, right? Like people being born, kids need to be raised. Like there's a reason women are attracted to men that have better financial footing, right? It's not just because women like nice things. I mean, of course, some women do like luxury and people like luxury broadly, but women really there's like a biological evolutionary impulse to be with a man that can give you a plot of territory and resources for child rearing, right? There's a reason women, they use that as basically a heuristic, right? If this man has been successful financially, well, that means he's somewhat respected probably in the social order. So he has some social status and he has resources through which we can replicate our genes into the future. And so going back to like the beginning of order, it's like if you actually want this, you want to expand the light circle of explored territory, right? You want to create a larger footprint within which humans can, have leisure and flourish and play and do art, all the things that we, that aren't work, basically. Obviously, it takes a lot of work to build that. But in building that, we give ourselves freedom to be human. All of that requires order. And requires these points of common unity, which are a form of order in and of themselves, and that we can just expect each other to do these things over time. And then with that comes community, right? We wire ourselves into community, and comes the mitigation of entropy. So we decrease uncertainty, we increase our ability to provide for ourselves into the future. And that is what lets us be fruitful and multiply. Right? If you really want to maximize being fruitful and multiplying, well, then you need all of these games. And the more these games are in accordance with, our biological impulses, let's say, like we all want to be able to have a little bit of territory on which we can kind of conserve food and resources, things that we've worked to obtain and then raise a family. The more we accord with that natural reality, nature to be commanded must be obeyed. So the more we obey that, the more we can be fruitful and multiply.
I think one thing I would add to that is if we get there, if you lower your uncertainty towards the future, if you're able to do that, if you're able to create somewhat of a structure out of the chaos that is coming towards you at every moment, it also gives you the tooling, I'd say, to also live in that moment. Right? So appreciate the life or experience the life that you've been given more than you would perhaps been doing before.
Yeah, that's leisure, by the way. Right?
Yes.
When you can just sit in the middle of the culture and the garden that you've created, right? Obviously, you engaged in a lot of work to create that, or maybe your ancestors engaged in the work, right? But you can sit there. Right now, I'm sitting in my home, right? I'm surrounded by books. I've got nice lights and air conditioning. I'm very comfortable. I mean, I didn't build all this stuff. I didn't think about all these ideas, right? We inherited all of this. Mm-hmm. But the fact that I can sit here and have, work, leisure, I don't know. I'm enjoying talking to you, so I'll call it leisure. The fact that I can sit here and have the freedom to do this, it's not my own doing, right? I inherited a lot from a lot of people across time.
I think even having that time makes you appreciate
Try doing that when you're naked in the middle of the night in the jungle somewhere.
Yes. But I think even having that and then it makes you grateful for that.
Yes.
Right? But you need to have the time to even ponder this.
Exactly.
And that,
yes.
Yeah. It's interesting that that's such a recurring thing that's coming back when you talk about also like the distortion of fiat money, right? It's actually fueling the chaos that is
Yes.
going towards you because the rules are changing all the time. And
That's
so
right.
if Bitcoin is a structured, predictable order and fiat money is an unstructured, unpredictable chaos, because Bitcoin is structured and predictable, it gives us a solid base layer to actually explore. I think that's what we're talking about, right? Like explore the unknown or search maybe even on purpose for chaos and possible innovation,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
in a conscious
Yes.
way, instead of being being an actor instead of being a subject
Yes.
to the chaos that is inevitably part of this version of our physical life.
That's what investment and entrepreneurship is, right? You've accumulated some resources to provide for you for a period of time, right? So you don't need to work. You don't need to go fishing every day to feed yourself, right? You've got a freezer full of fish, for instance, right? And you could apply that to all the different domains of human needs. But now you've given yourself the freedom to go and, as you said, pursue chaos, right? You need to actually go into the world and try something new, right? Like, I'm going to try to create this Chinese Mexican food restaurant, fusion restaurant. Like maybe people will like it, maybe they won't, right?
Yeah.
But I'm going to go into the uncertainty, try to create something new. If it's successful and people like it, well, then I've just advanced the human race, right? People now have this awesome new fusion restaurant that they didn't have before. And if you don't, and it fails, well, then other entrepreneurs in that area are enlightened by your failure. When you go up in flames, they're enlightened because now they know, oh, that didn't work. That Chinese Mexican food restaurant does not work in this time, in this place. So let me try something else. All right. So it's this information that's flowing through every human act, and the experimentation and innovation that really advances us. You need that good base of capital stock to support all of that. And the good base of capital stock comes through these hard points of common unity, like people following the rules and accumulating wealth over time gives them the freedom to go out and experiment.
It's interesting.
Bitcoin custody is evolving. Both self-custody and single third-party custody come with significant risk and trade-offs. Onramp is pioneering a new standard, multi-institution custody, which eliminates single points of failure, adding fault tolerance and redundancy to your setup. Onramp secures your Bitcoin in a segregated cold storage multi-key vault guarded by 3 independent institutional-grade custodians, none of which have unilateral control over your keys. Your funds are fully auditable on-chain, cannot be rehypothecated, and can only move or be withdrawn at your explicit direction. Multi-institution custody removes the technical, mental, and physical burdens of private key management, providing unparalleled peace of mind for you and your loved ones. Bitcoin is money, and as the price continues to appreciate, Onramp helps you seamlessly tap into financial services like trading, inheritance, insurance, loans, IRAs, and more, all without compromising on security or accessibility. Schedule a consultation with the Onramp team to learn more at onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. Again, that's onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove.
I'm thinking about how in the beginning we talked about the truth and the lie, right? Like there cannot be a lie if a truth doesn't exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm thinking in order for the order to exist, the chaos must also exist, right? But when we talk about a broken money that breaks the incentives, forcing you into chaos, makes you insecure and unadventurous, which also doesn't lead you to creating an order from the chaos.
That's right.
But we're now talking about the more conscious choice of adopting chaos, embracing chaos in order to innovate and then find something that can actually improve the order in the, let's say, the system that you're operating in, right? And I think that is, for me, that is close to the core, I'd say, of why Bitcoin is so profound. Like, imagine that we can align ourselves with that natural existence or natural order of the order and the chaos. Right? Like that exists. Like we cannot ignore that. Like that is objectively part of our reality. And when I think about it like that, another, I think, big idea for me that I have is kind of like, is Bitcoin then a self-fulfilling prophecy? As in, the longer Bitcoin exists, the more information it has stored, the lower the entropy of that ledger, the more valuable that ledger is, the higher the density of this information, more order, right? The higher its trustworthiness, predictability, stability, the higher the incentive to contribute to it, which ensures it exists longer, right? And then it's kind of like a repeat there.
Virtuous cycle.
Yeah. Do you think in a similar way about that?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And I think one of the most important mental models to embrace in dealing with this reality is that most things are feedback loops, right? That it's not linear. A causes B causes C. Like, no, the effect, the cause, first of all, it's very difficult to isolate a cause, right? That everything's multivariate basically. But then when you identify
infinite
cause
systems
and effect,
and systems, I'd say.
Yeah. And then so when you can identify cause and effect, in reality, the effect often changes the cause again. So it's like there's often feedback between cause and effect. And so what does that mean is that everything's always in flux and always changing, right? This is like kind of a philosophical axiom sort of about reality, that change is the only thing that never changes, right? Everything is changing all the time. So because everything's changing all the time and everything is in feedback loop relationships, they tend to be, in the human sense, we could say they're either virtuous cycles or they're vicious cycles. You could say they're self-reinforcing feedback loops. They're either going a positive direction as judged from the standpoint of the participant, or they're going a negative direction. And so what you're describing with fiat, it's doubly insidious too, because again, money is one of these things that we unconsciously perhaps expect to be orderly, right? Like you go into the marketplace, you embrace all the entropy and uncertainty. You're going to fail 9 times out of 10, roughly speaking. But the 1 time out of 10 you do succeed and you find a product or a service that people actually want and are willing to pay for, well, then you try to stash those proceeds, those profits, in something that's very low risk, right? You've already taken a lot of risk.
Yes.
You took a lot of market risk, a lot of execution risk, et cetera, to find the fitness between your product and the market.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I want to de-risk and take those profits and put them into something orderly, low risk, low entropy, right?
Yes.
That's what money is supposed to be. Money is supposed to be that thing, right? It's a thing we hold purchasing power in, right? Which is basic purchasing power is our claim on the social order, right? That other people are also creating purchasable goods and services, and this is the thing I can use to go and acquire those things to satisfy my wants. Well, what happens when you have fiat money is that you are now injecting entropy into the monetary order, the thing that we're depending on maintaining its orderliness so that we can embrace market uncertainty. Has now itself become uncertain. So not only does this create the vicious cycle of, okay, well, I as a producer am now incentivized less to produce because I can't keep my profits, right? Some of the profits and purchasing power I have earned is going to the central bank, the money printer. There's that problem. But then there's the further problem that I'm now incentivized, since I'm not incentivized to be productive, I'm actually incentivized to be non-productive.
Yes, correct.
Right? If I can just get close to the money printer, or maybe I'll just start my own money printing business, right? Like another criminal activity. I'm actually incentivized to contribute to the entropy. So hence the vicious cycle. Like once you, especially when you attack the thing, again, the monetary order that's supposed to be the thing that's very low surprise, low entropy, and you just inject entropy directly into it by setting up a central bank and having money printing, well, then everyone that uses the money is now incentivized to tilt that virtuous cycle of economics, where it's like I experiment, try to satisfy consumer wants, better, faster, cheaper. If I win, then I'm rewarded. You now turn that virtuous cycle into the vicious cycle of let me just scam everyone as fast as I can and run away with what I can, because there's no safe place to keep it. And there's also the incentive to take on more debt and the incentive to be, to gamble more and all these things. So it's like, it is a fantastic corruption, I think, of even the human soul when you really dig into it. As you used the term before, spiritual crime.
Yeah. That's
like the ultimate spiritual crime.
I'm now thinking about the word unnatural. What you're describing is very unnatural. It would not be, what you are describing would not be possible in wild nature.
Right. It's not emergent. It's a top-down, artificial selection.
But the possibility isn't even there in the wild, true nature, right? And then I was thinking, but nature, and then I was thinking nature is also a zero-sum game in the sense that there's, again, a cheetah wins and a buffalo loses or whatever. But that is not true, because there are a lot of examples in nature where animals actually work together, or they drink at a certain well, or the fish is under a certain shark or whatever. Like nature is not a zero-sum game. Yes, it's a symbiosis. It's the ecosystems, right? It's in many cases it is actually a mutually beneficial game, and the flowers and the bees and the, that is undeniable, right? That is the case. And when you are talking about what fiat money brings us, it gives us behavior that's very unnatural. It gives us outcomes that are very unnatural, even to the degree, and I think, this podcast is Bitcoin for Millennials, like one of the things that I see is that in our generation, people don't want to have kids because they are super insecure about the future. They're nihilistic about the future, right? So they're purposefully saying, I do not want to procreate. I am going against my biological urge because some sort of human-made technology is prohibiting me from actually following that. I think that is the craziest thing, actually, from the brokenness of money, right? The most unnatural thing that it is given us.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And this goes back to exactly what we were talking about earlier, right? Where if you have really strong private property, then you have these fixed rules in the game, right? That you can go and build a productive strategy on. I know that all I need to do is go into the world and find some fitness between my skills and my interest and what other people want. And if I can establish that fitness and I can give people what they want based on my skills, my passion, whatever the thing is, then I can reap profits that I can then keep in a low entropy medium like sound money. And I can build a base, an economic base on which I can afford to raise a family.
In the multiplied chaos of our world, accelerated by fiat money, it's becoming more and more difficult to actually do that. That's why a lot of people still want it, because they feel that it's not an attainable thing. Does that make sense? Like that's why all the self-help stuff, is so strong. Whereas if you live in a true capitalistic society, like you said, the merit-based, proof of work-based, then it's also okay to fail. I usually think, right? Like the whole point is to fail, to try and fail, right? And to also figure out like, who is then actually better than me? Oh, that's the guy that should actually make the bread. And I shouldn't make the bread because my bread sucks. I'm going to do another thing. I think that's very positive.
Yes.
Like that would drive actual human evolution, to tie back to the evolution. That would make you a better human, a better actor in the world.
Yes, absolutely. And then because you're able to learn, right? And learning is what evolution is doing, right? It's adapting to the changing circumstances. But when that learning signal is interrupted, right? Because you could actually be a really profitable bread maker, for instance. But if you're living in a very inflationary regime, well, then your business might still fail by no fault of your own. Right. So it's like you can't even learn, is there product market fit between my bread and the market because, they're printing money too quickly. And so what is this? This goes back to, again, the biblical stuff, right? Thou shalt not steal. Well, money printing is stealing. Did any surprise that one of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not steal, that if you do engage in it and you break that commandment, that you inhibit our ability to be fruitful and multiply, right? They go hand in hand. So why are people all of a sudden not wanting to start families? Because they can't afford it. It's not like people are like, oh, it's social media and people don't care anymore and the psychology's changed. It's like sure, everything's multivariate. Everything's multivariate. You could chase down a million different causes for why people aren't doing it. But I guarantee you, I don't want to say I guarantee you, I have very strong conviction that the primary contributor to people not wanting to start families is the affordability issue.
Yeah.
It's so obvious, right? What do? People do what they can't afford, right? People live up to their income or their net asset value, their net worth. If you rug pull them on that, then of course they're not going to want to have kids. Kids are insanely expensive to have, right? It's the most meaningful thing in the world, but if you can't afford it, then you literally can't do it. So there's no surprise to me at all that that's the case. So what does that mean? You mentioned like this lean into self-help and all these other things. Like people are trying to figure it out. They should be, reading the Bitcoin standard or studying economics rather than self-help because they're looking in the wrong direction. But if we frame it that way, then we might say that Bitcoin is the ultimate form of self-help. Right? You start putting your savings in Bitcoin, you're literally helping yourself financially. You're pulling yourself out of this trap. You're opting out of the fiat matrix. And then also if you study Bitcoin and you get very involved in the Bitcoin rabbit hole cognitively and philosophically, you will help yourself a lot too. Right? You will start
and others and they will help you again in turn. Yeah.
Yes. You become part of a community that's really competent at growing its purchasing power and growing its skills and critically examining itself and thinking about big ideas and big picture things. Like you level up. You actually level up, not only financially, but also spiritually.
When you adopt Bitcoin, you stop running the rat race and you start walking your own path.
Yes.
What I think. Yeah,
exactly. Knowing when to buy Bitcoin can feel complicated, and knowing how much to buy can be overwhelming. And getting started can be a headache, but it doesn't have to be. That's exactly why I recommend Coinbits, because it solves these major blockers and it's the easiest way to buy Bitcoin. With Coinbits' Round Ups feature, you can automatically convert your spare change into Bitcoin while you shop. For example, when you buy a coffee for $3.50, the extra 50 cents is rounded up and it goes straight into Bitcoin. Here's why that's a huge win for you, because you don't have to be a tech wizard or try to time the market just right with Bitcoin. With Coinbits Roundups, you simply set it, shop, and stack sats. And you can set this up in under 2 minutes. Just visit the website, connect your card, and boom, you're buying a little Bitcoin every time you spend money. So stop wasting your time with complicated exchanges or confusing shitcoin apps. Coinbits simplifies your Bitcoin savings strategy. So go to coinbits.app/breedlove Again, that's coinbits.app/breedlove. Have you ever wanted to live in an off-grid community with complete food, energy, and water independence? If so, then you need to check out the farm at Okefenokee. The farm is a pioneering community designed to foster longevity and well-being, eliminating elements that detract from these goals. At the farm, the convergence of nature, nutritious food, a supportive community, and the ethos of slowing down is unparalleled. Positioned at the gateway to the UNESCO World Heritage nominated Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, the farm at Okefenokee stands as a testament to a lifestyle that truly nurtures health and happiness. Unlike conventional housing developments where a token communal garden may suffice, the farm itself is the community. Small, intimate microvillages seamlessly integrate into the fabric of a sprawling agricultural community. So if you're interested in joining this off-grid community, then go to okefarm.com today to learn more about becoming a member. Make sure to tell them that I sent you for a $21,000 discount on their custom cabin pricing. Again, go to okefarm.com to learn more about joining this revolutionary regenerative agriculture community.
I want to touch upon two big things, I think, in the theme of what we're talking about. You had a tweet, and you mentioned it earlier also. Because Bitcoin is a game that serves the self-interest of every player, it's only a matter of time before everyone is playing. Yeah. And I actually replied to that, or I quote posted it. And I said, Bitcoin turns our innate greed and need for self-preservation into a mutually beneficial game that empowers and enlightens each player.
Yes.
You know, we see that because Bitcoin exists and more people adopt it, they are incentivized to contribute to it in whatever way, which makes it stronger, lower entropy, etc. Like everything we talked about. You know, so Bitcoin is a mirror to the fiat money system that we are stuck in. You know, it shows you the flaws. Why do you think that is so profound, and even maybe even liberating to the people that eventually decide to play that different game? I think, well, you are also an example of that.
Yeah. So this is great. It's a great one. So I want to disambiguate self-interest versus greed first.
Mm-hmm.
This is the domain of the ego, right? Where the ego, properly checked, is actually really useful, right? When the saber-toothed tiger jumps through the window, I guess those are extinct. When the bear jumps through the window, you want to have that healthy response of like, let me get out of here, you know, like that egoic, let me get out of here. That's self-interest, and I think that's a great thing. I actually want everyone in the world to maximize their self-interest. Where I would disambiguate that from greed is where someone seeks to advance their self-interest at the expense of someone else's self-interest. So self-interest maximized in a world that is universally consensual, that all interactions are consent-based, that makes a lot of sense to me. But what I would call greed is when we cross that line into coercion, right? It's where now like, hey, I'm hungry. I have self-interest. I'm hungry, but I'm going to steal your sandwich because I'm too lazy to make a sandwich, right? So I'm just going to benefit from your work real quick. And then we're all done, right? I would call that greed. Now, a lot of people associate greed with like the accumulation of money. Well, my question would be, how did you get the money? Did you go out into the world and obtain it consensually, right? Did you give people solutions to their problems that they paid you for?
Yeah.
Well, that's great. I want as many of those people as possible. I want as many rich, pure entrepreneurs as possible, because that means they have solved a vast quantity of human problems and they've been rewarded appropriately. There's nothing greedy about that at all. Now, if you instead are a statesman or a mafioso and you've been $5 wrench attacking people to obtain all of your money, well, then I would call that greed, right? You have benefited at the expense of others. So I think we actually want to maximize in this world. There's like this And look, the devil's in the details, right? Like I would say the line is private property, but even that it can be a little bit nuanced at times, right? You have to read a book like The Ethics of Liberty by Rothbard to really get into these edge cases about, when is private property actually violated in all these different situations. The visualization I have is like there's basically this like speedometer, if you will, and we want to push competition and self-interestedness up to the maximum. Actually, we want to max that out. We want everyone to act as most self-interested way as possible. This is where maybe someone like Ayn Rand would agree with me too on her essay, The Virtue of Selfishness. But what you don't want to do, there needs to be a hard line on that speedometer, basically, that it doesn't cross into the red zone, which is when you start having people advancing their own individual self-interest at the expense of other individual self-interest. Mm-hmm. Once you get into that, it's cannibalism, basically, right? Like people are feeding off of one another rather than feeding one another in kind of a proverbial entrepreneurial sense.
Isn't this why the rules are needed that we talked about?
Exactly. You need the fixed rules, the unbreakable rules, right? So if someone does violate the property of someone else, there needs to be a penalty, or there needs to be an incentive not to violate the property of someone else, or it needs to be made very difficult and expensive and risky to violate the property of someone else. That's why Bitcoin is so impactful, right? You hold Bitcoin in a multi-sig. Well, the premise of violating someone's property, if they've held that Bitcoin, they put that Bitcoin in a proper custody schema, the option virtually goes away, right? It's like, I can't $5 wrench attack the guy. I can't inflate it. I can't seize it. I guess I'm just going to go be an entrepreneur then and try to, give him something valuable for his Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Work for it. Yes.
That's it. Yeah.
So that's it. It's like, we want to max out self-interestedness, but with that hard line of respect for private person and property. And then that prevents the manifestation of greed. But even just a little bit, it's such a fine line, because once you get even a little bit into that greed, you start creating these perverse incentives where like people are now disincentivized from producing as much. They're more incentivized to become a criminal. And if that game gets deep enough into the red zone, then the social fabric falls apart and we just become animals, basically.
Today I had a conversation. We talked about the Jetsons in the 60s or the 70s. The TV show. Oh yeah, like in 2020 we'll have flying cars and we'll have all these things. And all these thoughts at that time were pretty rational, right? Like, oh, if this continues like this, then we'll get there. But we're not there, And in some cases we actually go back in time. For example, the bread is $4 and not 50 cents is what I always say. That's what we're seeing. I do think, and I wonder if you agree, because of the flawed fiat system, it won't take long before people have to. Like, they have to realize that this is a flawed system and they have to do something. Yeah. What is your idea around how we can help more people wake up to this mathematically assured destruction of the money system that they live in? Like, how can we... You've been trying also for a few years.
Well, I have, and I've thought about the question a lot, frankly. And in the last kind of minute here that I have, I'll say the tongue-in-cheek way, which is, you either take the orange pill voluntarily now, or you take the orange suppository involuntarily later. Right? It's like you're either going to study and learn about how you're getting scammed and you can opt out of the scam, or at some point the scam is going to force you to figure that out. Right? And you're much better off. It's much more cost effective to learn from the mistakes of others than to learn from your own mistakes. Although most of us learn from our own mistakes. So what can we do? Obviously education is a big one. Something we both looks like committed our lives to, at least to some extent. But I actually think it's more useful to build businesses that make it accessible, make it understandable, if you're using, like, I love the idea of creating a business that uses Bitcoin like on the back end. And so just by people using whatever the useful product or service that you've provided them, in this case, probably be a service, could be a digital service, that they're somehow also creating reservation demand for Bitcoin. Now, different ways to think about this. But like, if you become a MicroStrategy customer or a strategy customer, right? Well, then you're giving more revenue to that business. That business puts Bitcoin on its balance sheet. So you're sort of indirectly contributing to the monetization of Bitcoin. That's a kind of an obvious example. There might be certain social media apps or like Nostr apps that are sending Bitcoin as zaps. So if you increase the activity on these platforms, you're actually increasing the reservation demand for Bitcoin. If you build a Lightning wallet or a Lightning-based service of some kind, you could actually be contributing to the proliferation of the Lightning network and thus more demand for Bitcoin. So I think those are the two big ones. You got to educate, and then you need to build something that people use that either creates more demand for Bitcoin or makes Bitcoin more usable for other people. I think these are the best paths to go down.
Yeah, I agree. I do want to ask you quickly my very last question, because I ask everyone the same question, which is, what is a core belief that you will never let go of?
Above all, freedom.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for this conversation. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, let's do it again. Thank you.
Thanks, Bram. Great to see you.
Brother. Thank you. Likewise.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.